Hello, Mandibil here. I have made a small, not completely exhaustive lists of various definitions and descriptions and so on about truth that Stefan Molyneux has been putting forth during the last 14 or 15 years to see both how confusing it is and how incorrect it is and unusable, basically, it is, right? What I would, if it would be nice if a philosopher who wants to be rigid and deeply philosophical and so on would have sort of a library on perhaps his website where he put sort of a list of definitions. So people, if they were in doubt about what he's talking about, could always go there and see the definition. There could be revisions of the definitions, but then the first definition, version 1, could be, then version 2 could be under that, and saying version 1 is now obsolete, now it's version 2 functioning, and from that date, this is the new definition and so on. That would be one way to do it, right? Trying to dig out these different kinds of definitions all over his sort of work in videos and in articles or in books or whatever is a bit of a work to do. And I have found enough, in my opinion, that possibly a lot more, like in all his videos and podcasts, where he references or defines truth in some way. I'm sure I know I've seen it elsewhere, but this is to clarify. One of the problems with Stefan Molyneux is there's no definition of anything to really hang your hat on, right? And if you find a definition, you should be aware that there is an equally plausible Stefan Molyneux definition somewhere else that might not hang. There might be some underlying story, and I might attempt to try to find it, but it's so fluffy in the definition that he could claim any kind of underlying story as he sees fits, and that underlying story, I'm sure, wouldn't explain anything in the first case. So, and that it would only try to establish some sort of cohesiveness in his attempt and at defining things. Okay, so if we go back to the book UPB, which I have been doing a deconstruction of recently, and you can find it here on my channel, in actually around 10-hour deconstruction, so I must be kind of mad, right? And I don't go through the whole book because it's not necessary. I only focus on the part where he establishes his framework, so-called framework for UPB or ethics, right? The rest is just, mumbo jumbo. In UPB, he says, and this is my condensation of a series of descriptions of 3 kinds of truth, which is little truth, our sense perception, what I would call qualia. I mean, it's the experience of red or the taste of a strawberry or the feel of a bicycle, or that's qualia, right? That's how I would understand sense perception. So middle truths are oppositional principles, and it's a comparison. Apparently, opposite, when things are opposite, they are sort of compared, right? And it's principles. Now we're dealing with principles. Now we are not dealing with sense data. Even it little, middle, and great truth underneath here seems to have sort of a connection, since they're all related to the same word called truth, and their little, middle, and great is sort of a degree of something, like. But still, he mixes the measuring stick of what he's talking about. Here's qualia, here is the principles, and the great truth is conceptual consistency, which apparently is a comparison of concepts. So it's 3 different categories that there's lumped together sort of superficially by using the same term, truth, to describe all of them, and then just differentiating them with little, middle, and great. And this is, I mean, what the hell is that, right? I've never heard anything like this before, right? This is craziness. This is total freaking craziness. What is that? I mean, what is it? I mean, if you went to a philosophy gathering with people who are, if I don't know if there are such things, but people will say, what the hell is he talking about, right? Okay, so later he describes truth more precise. I would say he doesn't call it a definition. He says truth then can be measured according to two central criteria. So it's not exactly a definition. It's apparently more how it works, or the criteria for how to measure truth, even though I wouldn't say truth is a kind of measurement. Okay, and I go into more deep discussion of this in the part of my deconstruction of UPB, which is, I don't know if it's part 3 or 4 or something like that. Okay, 1. Truth is a measure of the correlation between the ideas in our mind and the consistency of rationality, which is directly derived from the consistent behavior of matter and energy in the real world. 2. Truth is also a measure of the correlation between the ideas in our minds and the nature and behavior of matter and energy in the real world. So, I mean, if you can explain to me what this means, I would be grateful, because it's so extremely convoluted that I have no way of figuring out what he's talking about there. And it's also a description of a measurement. It's not exactly a definition, truth. I'm uncertain, right? He doesn't use the word definition, but he's describing something in a definitional way, so to say. So what we are talking about here is really uncertain, right? It's hard to get to the truth of what if this is a definition or not. So it's a measure. Truth is truth then can be measured according to two criteria. So the criteria to measure truth with has the word truth in it. Or is he just repeating the same sentence he has here? Truth can be measured. Truth is a measure according to two criteria. Truth is a measure of the correlation between. So he's repeating this. So it's not exactly a begging the question or circular argument. So why do you repeat it? Don't do that. It's so bad philosophy for such a central thing as truth, right? Measure of the correlation. Truth is a measure of the correlation between ideas in mind and reality, directly derived from the consistent behavior of matter and energy in the real world. So it's sort of measurement of a correlation between ideas. And are we talking about definition of truth? No. So nobody in their right mind can use this for anything, right? It's absolutely potentially one of the worst definitions of anything I have ever seen. It's ridiculous. I mean, who would work with something like that, right? Who could write something like that? Who could wander around pretending to describe anything with sentences like that, right? Okay. So in a book called On Truth, I mean, about truth. I am talking about truth in this book. in 2007, there's no definition of truth, none whatsoever, none that I could find at least. Then it would be some contextual stuff that somewhere in the text, in a context, there's something that could, okay, this could maybe be seen as a definition, but there's no sort of sentence or anything presented as this is what I define as truth, right? But he used the term truth contextual all over the place. Truth is used everywhere in the text, but there's no definition of truth in a book called On Truth. I mean, what? Are you out of your freaking mind? Okay, so there's a book from 2018 called Essential Philosophy, where there's a statement that says, truth is the accurate identification of facts and principles in objective reality. Now, this is a sort of problematic, because this is a very condensed thing that needs a bit of context, and I have not brought in the context in where it's written, so that is a weakness in my presentation. I could say that, but this is not a deep philosophical dissertation of a quote philosophical work, but I'm trying to find some, let's say, internal problems in the statement, right? It should be able to stand alone in some way or another, right? Even though it needs a bit of context. So truth is the accurate identification. Well, truth is not an identification. You don't identify some fact and then call it true, right? You don't say, that's a blackbird, and that's an accurate identification, so it must be true. How do I know it's accurate, right? True is the conclusion of something that is accurate, right? So maybe that's what he means, and maybe it has some merit to it, right? But it's not exactly clear what he means. But then, what is a fact? A fact must be something that has already become true. Otherwise, it's not a fact. If you have something that is fact, but you're not certain if it's true, how can you identify that fact in an accurate way, right? How do you identify a fact? Because it has already been identified as a fact. If it's a fact, it's not up for discussion, so to say, right? So facts is not something you identify. You identify something else, and then you call it a fact by saying it's true. So he's sort of reversing the argument in some weird way, right? As if facts arrive in your mind, and then you just have to identify it. That's not how it works. Everything you experience, you have no idea how to check. There's no way to check whether you should be experiencing that, right? There's no manual anywhere that can say, that blackbird out there, I shouldn't experience that. That's just my mind doing tricks, or the reality doing tricks, or a subjective understanding making tricks on my mind. But you only have that, your own experience. You have nothing to cross-check it with, right? You have to somehow, without knowing whether or not you should experience something, create a philosophy that enables you to distinguish whether or not something is a fact without knowing it's a fact beforehand. Because otherwise you run into the problem of infinite regress, because then you have to have knowledge of that which you want to establish knowledge about. You can't go and reference some other knowledge whether or not it's knowledge, because then that knowledge would need some other knowledge to get to that knowledge and get to that knowledge, and so on, back in time until the Big Bang and whatever, right? And then you wouldn't solve anything about knowledge or truth, right? So, but then principles, there are no principles in objective reality. in any way you could understand reality. Reality, that's which you experience with your sort of your senses, but you can't sense principles. Principles are particular mental constructs to describe the behavior of reality, right? So you observe reality and then you take it sort of into your mind and, fiddle with it and say, here is Newton's second law. But it was not this, you didn't observe the principle, Newton's law, out there as a fact, because it's not a fact. And I know I'm conflating facts and principle here, but principles are not observable. Okay, you need to really, really, both Stefan Molyneux and the listener here and his listeners, principles and mathematics and methods and descriptions and categories and all these things are not observable. They are not objects. They are not attributes. They are nothing like anything you can experience. They are mental constructs that are somehow considered useful to behave in the future, right? I'm using this principle to behave in the future, right? Okay, fine. But you didn't observe that the principle wasn't true. That's a principle. That's true, right? No. That's not how it works, right? So it's baloney. Okay. So in a recent video called True But Compared to What, he says, and this is my condensation of a sort of fluffy description, truth is the relationship between the formulations in your mind that are claimed to be universal. And I to be honest, I don't know what that is. A formulation isn't that a description on a piece of paper, or how you formulate Newton's second law, for instance? It is formulated by a force equals mass times acceleration. That's a formulation. But the mind, how the mind works, or your experience of your qualia, it's hard to call that formulations, because that's sort of an individual expressing himself or herself. So is it a formulation? I know he's talking about this on the fly and, finding expressions that he, in the moment and so on. But this is an important definition. It should be sort of written in stone on his website. He's just going to say, this is the definition, and you can go read my, definition on my definition part of my website, and I have a dissertation underneath that explains why it is so. So you shouldn't find these kind of, or create these definitions on the fly. It's simply bad philosophy. It's unbelievably bad. When you look at all the other descriptions and definitions of truth, this doesn't help, right? Where are your principles? Is the principle a formulation in your mind? Well, that I might agree with you upon. But then formulation, that is something you do in the external world, right? Is a relation the same as a identification? And what is a claim? Is my mind claiming something? Because I don't experience claims in my mind. I can claim something. I can state something. I can claim or make a proposition that's a blackbird. But that is me consciously creating effects in the world that can be experienced by other individuals because I want to communicate, right? Is that a claim in my mind? Does it float claims around in my mind and another claim, a claim between one formulation and another formulation? I mean, oh man, I can't use this. Okay, it's impossible. Okay, so in the book Essential Philosophy, there are, and I haven't read this through thoroughly, so I'm taking it on the fly. Why not? If Stefan Molyneux can do it, I can do it, right? So notes on the book Essential Philosophy, and he says, philosophy is the study of truth. Okay, So you have had a philosophy show in 14, 15 years, and you've been studying truth then, apparently, right? And you have only been able to come up with these kinds of ridiculous descriptions and definitions of truth in 15 years. In 15 years, studying truth, this is what you have been creating? F off, man. This is ridiculous, right? Which is a definition that raises almost as many questions as it answers. Yeah, you bet it does. Because it doesn't raise anything but many more questions that needs answers the way you have thought it out in 15 years, right? Well, the problem is philosophy is not the study of truth, right? Truth is only a part of epistemology. I would say truth is an necessary way to draw conclusions about propositions with the final goal of establishing some kind of objectivity. That's what you need truth for, right? You have to express a relation between your subjective experience and an object, between two or more individuals, and that is what truth is needed for. It's simply just a conclusion, right? But it has to function as a bridge between subjectivity and objectivity. And it can't be verified. Truth can't be verified. You can't verify truth. You can only say, okay, I'm going along with the truth. If I agree on truth with somebody else about a certain proposition, I'm willing to go along with this agreement that we both say it's true, but either of us can't know whether or not the other one is lying, and that is a big problem. So I mean, it's a big problem. It's it's the fluffy part of ethics. Okay. What is truth? Later in the same book. How is truth differentiated from falsehood? Why is truth even preferable to falsehood? Well, who says it is preferable? So this is a leading question. It's a sort of manipulated, used car salesman trick, right? Do you want the red one or the blue one? It's so fucking ridiculous. Who can write ridiculous, bad philosophy like that? Only a very bad philosopher, right? Why is truth even preferable to falsehood? Who says it's preferable? Okay, it's preferable because you need it to be, and then you just it has to be preferable, right? And there's also this thing with truth and falsehood. It's like truth is something different from false, right? No, it's not. It's the same kind of definition. It's a sort of a negation of truth, you could say, right? False is, okay, if you make the proposition that's a blackbird, and I don't experience a blackbird, well, I'm going to say that your proposition is false. I might say it's true if I want to manipulate. I mean, you don't know if the other guy, you only know if you yourself are lying about the proposition, right? But the other guy doesn't know that, and I wouldn't know if even somebody claiming or stating the proposition is actually experiencing that thing that he's claiming. But if I'm experiencing a blackbird and somebody else says that's a blackbird, I haven't yet told that person that I experienced blackbird. So if that person says that's a blackbird, it's very likely that that person is experiencing it. Otherwise, that person would have an incredible luck in stating a false proposition to him that actually matches a true proposition for me. So that's a good way that finding out whether or not you're dealing with somebody else who's actually speaking the truth is if they can propose something that you already experience. Truth describes verifiable and objective principle and experiences. Okay, that's a bit like one of those up here. Truth is accurate identification of facts and principles in objective reality. So let's let's not go into that one. Okay, the reason is that a truth proposition, no, truth is not a proposition, okay? Truth is an affirmation of a proposition. You need to distinguish that. Truth is not a proposition. You can't say truth, right? So if you're just saying truth, you're not describing what is true. You have to make the proposition and say that's a blackbird, and then you can say that is true, right? Must be compared to something in order to find out whether it's true or not. No, if it's a true proposition, it has to be. I mean, you should consider it true according to that person who states the truth. And if it's true to you, you don't need to figure out if it's true or not, because you know it already, right? That's why you're making the proposition, I suppose, right? Truth cannot be entirely self-referential. I don't know what he's talking about, honestly. Otherwise, it cannot be truth at all. Truth is a standard that we apply to propositions that reference something other than their own principles and arguments. Yeah, now we start to sound that it's something that applies to proposition. That's correct. That reference something other than their own principles. Propositions reference something that is not their own principles. No, you're not referencing principles. You're referencing objects, right? You're referencing a cow or a fence or a tree or a cloud or something like that. You're not referencing a principle because you can't experience a principle. For instance, if I say there are no bananas on the table, is that a true statement? But you can't say that this is nonsense. You can't say there are not, because then you are implying that there should be something by saying there are, and then you're saying it's not there. Bullshit. It's not a proposition. So it falls on how propositions should be formulated. So a banana sitting on a table, the end, if there's only one banana, no bananas, the 3 mangoes and an elephant, then it's a false. If I say that I dreamt about 2 bananas right now, however, there is no way for. He's always going into that dream thing. Why are you always referring to dreams when you're trying to talk about that freaking reality that you have such a fetish for? Talk about reality and forget the dreams. Right? They are purely subjective. They can never be objective in any way, so don't bother with them until you have getting a freaking cut out in stone description of what truth is, or definition of what truth is in that reality. You may believe me if you think I'm an honest person, but it cannot be established as true in any rational and empirical fashion. Okay, so it's an exorcism of the Cartesian demon. Yeah. Truth is a statement about objective reality that conforms with the nature and principles of objective reality. But that seems like a circular argument, right? It's a statement about objective reality that conforms with objective reality. But that is what you want. You want some kind of confirmation or confirmation about objective reality. So then you have to go out to objective reality and figure out if that statement about objective reality conforms with objective reality. How do you know that? You have to go out to objective reality once again. So it's an infinite regression back in time, and you have destroyed yourself, your idea of knowledge. So that truth doesn't work, right? If I say that there is a cloud overhead, my statement is true. There is, in fact, a cloud overhead. But the fact is what you establish with truth. You don't make a... Yeah, I know if it's a proposition, there is a cloud overhead. Okay, let's say there's a proposition. There's a cloud overhead. If it's there, it is, in fact, a cloud overhead. No, now you are sort of saying that you have an implicitly have access to something that is intrinsically objective, but you don't have you have but your own experience, right? If you experience a cloud, you can say you experience a cloud. You can say that proposition is true for you, right? That's all you can say. You can't say, okay, I'm now going over in the cupboard here with the objective facts, and I'm saying, oh yeah, it says there's a cloud. Okay, close the cupboard and say, I have figured out that cloud is objective. No, that's not how it works, right? That's not how it works. And I've beaten this horse senselessly so many times now. Truth and falsehood exist as distinct states in only one entity in the universe that we know of, the human mind. Oh. This is a claim. I mean, truth is not something that exists. If it's in your mind is not existence. Existence is a reference to an experience that should represent something outside your mind. That is the ontological, that is ontology. It's a description of what you claim to be outside. And if you can establish some way of distinguishing that, then you are saying that thing exists, meaning that is the thing outside my mind. What you're referring to is a representation of that which is outside, which you do not have access to. But the claim is, and that experience is that representation of a thing outside that exists. Truth is a state that results when a concept matches an entity or a hypothesis matches the fact of reality. But you don't have any facts. Are you sort of a magic fact machine, or a part of you is a fact machine that can go around telling yourself and others, this is a fact, this is a fact, this is a fact? Are you the only one in the universe who can do that? And if you're not, how can other people do it? It seems like you have some certain access to facts, and then you're going around telling people, this is a fact, this is a fact, this is a fact. It's not how it works. You have got things wrong, and it's very likely a incorrect metaphysics you are basing this on. Truth always refers to concept or language and the degree to which they match what exists and occurs in. So it is a bad metaphysics. This all comes from bad metaphysics. You have got metaphysics wrong. That's why you are, always trying to get to this objective realm, and then you're going back to all these weird little subjective individuals saying, hey, there's an objective over here. You must look over here. Like Anders Schwartz, you must look over here. Go and look over. Don't look here at all these subjective. It's not philosophy. Go over and look at the objective reality over here, because I found out that's where the real stuff is, right? It's something like that. It's completely mad. It's completely crazy. Okay, if I say that magnetism can pull a tree down a tree, then I am equally incorrect. The relationship between concept in the mind and matter or energy in the world. Matter and energy is a mental description of what you call the outside world. There's no difference between mind and matter and energy, in the sense that matter and energy is one of those descriptions in your mind that refers to something outside your mind. So you got it absolutely and utterly wrong, right? Okay, I'm not going into this is ridiculous, right? So it's all sort of various. It's to reach a general understanding of how confused Stefan Molyneux is about such a central thing as truth. And you should take it as a warning against a very bad philosopher, or someone who hasn't thought things through and think he is, he knows everything, right? He has deepest insight into everything called philosophy. And this should prove a sufficient description of Stefan Molyneux's approach to philosophy to say that you can't trust this guy in anything, right? He's got it basically everything wrong. There's very little that seems to be functioning, right? And if you're buying a car and you get two wheels, half a car and a windshield, You wouldn't say that you have a car, right? Even if it's a half a car, or there's something that looks like a car over there, right? You would say, well, I don't want that crap, right? You would want the real thing where everything is, squeaky clean, right? You don't want sort of half-ass shit like this. So get it out of my side. Okay. That was it for about Stefan Molyneux and his loose, relationship with truth and other stuff. And I hope to see you again some other time.